Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Susan Burns, and I'm a professor of Japanese history in the history department, and also have an appointment in ELC. So it's really a great honor to introduce our speaker today. In partnership with the University of Chicago Library, the CEAS Lecture Series is an initiative that advances the University of Chicago's Center for East Asian Studies mission in fostering dialogue and interdisciplinary collaboration. This annual series presents eminent scholars who concentrate on the study of East Asia in a variety of disciplines. For more information on this series and who's speaking this year, visit the check-in table in the foyer and scan the QR code, which will take you to the series webpage. And please join us for our final lecture in the series for this academic year, which will take place on Thursday, May 7th. As a reminder, you can also visit the CEAS YouTube channel, where you can watch a variety of talks and programs that have been sponsored by our center. Tonight's talk will also be recorded and will be available on the YouTube channel in the near future. So I'm delighted to introduce Professor Yoshikuni Igarashi of Vanderbilt University. Professor Igarashi and I go back a long time. We were both students here at UChicago. I was in ELC. He was in the history department in the 90s, early 90s. We won't specify which year. We're getting old. Professor Igarashi is one of the most important historians working on Japan's post-war era. He's a cultural historian, and his work draws upon a rich cultural archive that includes film, literature, TV, pro wrestling, and other forms of cultural production. He is the author of 3 books. His first book, Bodies of Memory, Narratives of War in Post-War Japanese Culture, which was published by Princeton in 2000, explored the impact of war and defeat on post-war Japanese society by examining the tension between the repression and the expression of the trauma of war. His second book, called Homecomings, The Belated Return of Japan's Lost Soldiers, which was published by Columbia in 2016, explores the plight of former soldiers who belatedly returned to post-war Japan at the end of the Asia-Pacific War. And this included POWs who were detained in Siberia, in labor camps, and those who survived in the jungles of the South Pacific, in a couple of cases for decades following Japan's defeat. And his most recent monograph, called Japan 1972, Masculinity in the Age of Mass Consumption and Metavisuality, which was published by Columbia University Press in 2021, focused on the transformation of Japanese society in the late 1960s and early 1970s, the era of rapid economic growth, as we used to call it, and the development of mass consumer society. And it analyzes Japanese responses to the profound social and cultural and economic transformations that accompanied that set of changes. So today, Professor Igarashi will be talking about TV, and his title is A Not-So-Secret History of Newspaper Television Program Listings in Japan. So please join me in welcoming Professor Igarashi.
Hi, my name is Yoshikuni Igarashi, and I'm honored to be here. Thank you very much, Susan, bringing me here, and staff in the Center for East Asian Studies to make my visit possible. I'm excited for several reasons. Obviously excited to share my new ideas. And also, I just find out that today happened to be the birthday of Karl Marx. On this auspicious day, I'm giving a talk. Also, I left University of Chicago 33 years ago. I started teaching at Vanderbilt, single job. But after 33 years, I came back. So I find this symmetry wonderful. Anyways, I find it good reasons many reasons to be excited about being here. So I'd like to start with the explaining, plugging today's talk into my first book, not the first book, the last book, which I published 2021, at the beginning of the COVID and the pandemic. So I didn't really have time to really go around and talk to people about my book. So I'm using this opportunity for that. And I need more readers, to be honest. Besides that, so today's topic is basically a spin-off from this book and thinking about 1972 in different ways. So briefly, my claim in this book is very simple, which is Japan changed radically in 1972. Before 1972, Japanese society was very different places. People did not take a notice because millions of people did not die. There was no regime change. But if you look at different registers, then you realize there was a radical change. And that register, one of the registers, or couple I should say, are mass consumer society and also a media environment. So today's talk has something to do with both, but especially with the media environment. So very briefly, this book is 250 pages, so 250 pages in 2 minutes. So the critical idea is that disappearance of the outside, critical outside. So this is the regime around 1950. So another register is economic expansion. So Japan in the post-war period rapidly expanded its economic sphere, economic activities. The regime, conservative regime, worked hard to expand economy. Not only that, but also share that benefit to many people. So imagine 1950, still Japanese economy is sort of taking off, and there are a lot of pockets of poverties. Then it was easy to imagine you are being outsider. Imagine yourself being the laborer, day laborer, or the farmer, somewhere remote community. Then you don't get to enjoy benefit from the economic development. So in this, if I have this, wait. You can see I'm not technologically inclined. In this, you can see the middle part, just see that as the inside. So if you're an insider, you get enjoy it, but you are physically or otherwise standing outside, you are not enjoying this. But what happened under the regime of high growth economy is basically the economic benefit expanded, especially in the form of mass consumer society. And once you get to this part, then really hard to find outside. So in the critical discourse, leftist discourse, critique was possible because you always found outside from which you criticize inside. So you always position yourself an outsider critiquing inside. But once you get to this phase, then basically everybody is part of mass consumer society. How do you live without consuming? Not only that, even you are part of mass consuming society, meaning that even your behavior, purchasing patterns, that itself is folded into and become important information to be circulated and purchased, right? Your behavior becomes part of this mass consumer society as well. So in this phase, it is really difficult to imagine outside the society. And media-wise, in similar ways, basically, that's when you see, the vision or gaze turning back becomes more self-reflective, whereas in the past, you look for outside. And then in this new phase, you begin to try to find outside within yourself. I'm not getting into more details about this discussion. If you're interested in, you can always pick up my book and start reading it. So today's connection is 1972, and I'll explain how this part relates to the TV section in newspaper. So 1972. So another claim, this is something that I would have talked more when I was writing the book, but afterwards I realized that I should not should not have focused on just Japan's case. And there are many examples that suggest that 1972 was also a turning point in other parts of the world. It's global change. And some examples, a couple examples. I have others if you're interested in. So the first one is limits of growth. This is the document produced by the Club of Rome, and basically specialists arguing that the economy or the Earth or the system itself is finite. So if they keep growing the economy at that given pace, then they will run out of materials, resources, and at the crisis moment. So it's sort of a discovering that there's, at one point there will be no more outside from which you can pull resources from. So I would see this is a good example of awareness that this self-enclosed space is not sort of a daunting to many people in 1972. Another example. Is this blue marble. This is not the first picture of Earth, but one of the most beautiful and taken by the human crew, Apollo 17, I believe. And this is also 1972. And this became sort of an iconic image of self-enclosed system. Earth as a self-enclosed system, environment as such became that system. And that awareness, once again, humans looking back ourselves, and that awareness is with us. So there are several other examples I can share later perhaps, but I would like to shift the gear back to Japan and talk about a couple examples. Somewhat related to today's topic, but sort of zooming in into more specialized topic here. So this is a part of the song, lyrics from a 1972 song. If you grew up in this time period in Japan, everybody knows this song, Kasaganai, no umbrella. And pundits talked about this infinitive ad nauseum. And they always talk about this part that, in the city, youth suicides on the rise. It's written so in the corner of the morning paper. So, hey, the problem is, today's rain. There's no umbrella. I've got to go. I've got to get out to see you, over to your side of town, drenched in the rain. Cold rain seeps into my heart today. I can't think of anything but you. Isn't that a good thing? So the pundits always talk about this as sort of a turning point, turning from the season of politics, late 1960s. Japan was no exception, embracing radical politics. And that died down early part of 1970s. That's also part of my book. And then pundits take this as an example that, see, today's youth so apolitical. They are just concerned about the private matters. They don't really care about, for example, suicide on the rise, so on and so forth, social issues. And I see, yeah, that's right, but I think they're missing a large part, which is the last part. Isn't that a good thing? So this song, I'm sorry, I can't sing it to you, but when you listen to this last part comes somewhat odd. So this is like a drama, part of drama. This guy just running in rain, trying to get to the other side of town. And it's like on the TV screen. And when it comes to the last line, he turns around and breaks the fourth wall and say, is that a good thing? Or the third eye, looking back what he was doing, and he asks, is that a good thing? And that self-awareness, I think, to me, is very 1972 awareness of the milieu or the almost zeitgeist. All right, one last example is this is the information magazine that inaugurated 1972. It was very small. First print was only 2,000, but later it became sort of a phenomenal publication. At one point, they're publishing more than 500,000 copies bi-weekly. And this, what it is basically information magazine. The staff went around Tokyo metropolitan area, gathered information provided to readers. This kind of stuff never existed. In a way, rendering the city, urban area, legible. Information provided. Information became the product merchandise. And that's something to do. This is sort of a segue into my discussion as to turning life as such, or space as such, into a information, sort of a consumable information. And that's what it is in this. So this is Japanese newspapers' back pages. And I am not willing to say, but tempted to say, this is very Japanese, unique. Because I have looked and nothing like this exists anywhere else. These major newspapers, national, regional, newspapers carrying, television sections on the back page, prominent on the back page. Back page is very valuable because they always carry, the space for advertisement. That's the way they raise money. But they're dedicating this space for television listings. And that's weird. And I thought that takes some explanation here. So I will just jump into what I prepared here. So from the early 1970s through the first decades of 2000s or so, a common scene in living rooms throughout Japan involved a home delivery newspaper that was briefly perused in the morning and set aside for easy reference to the day's television programs. To help readers do so, most Japanese dailies, national and regional, carried and still carry television listings on their back page. A section acknowledged as one of the most faithfully read part of these publications. Providing concise, essential information on each program beyond titles, the gridded guide to television programs in Japanese newspapers served as an effective medium through which television stations enticed potential viewers, and newspaper companies in turn capitalized on television's popularity to keep or expand their readership. So before getting into more details, I have to emphasize that in Japan, TV companies and newspaper companies have very close ties. Television companies basically own large part of stocks of television companies. So it makes sense that the newspapers giving up so much space to advertise televisions, but it's supposed to be fair. They cannot sort of favor one television station over others. So given that, it seems to be natural, but there is more to this story. So I looked at the other countries' newspapers. I found two examples. So Pravda, Russian paper, carried newspaper sections back page in 1970s, 1980s. But Pravda back then was only 6 pages, and the TV section was tiny. Whereas here, it's whole spread, and so much information here. Also, I found that some Korean papers carried similar information on back page. Not as extensive as Japanese papers, but none of them, as far as I know, carry them on the back page today. So there's some resonance, but it seems like Japanese case is far out in terms of this exercise. And also in Korean case, we can probably think about the sort of interactions between Korean paper and Japanese papers, but I haven't found any evidence suggesting that specific control. But as I start looking at this, I have found sort of little scholarship on this. Only so much in Japanese scholarship people don't really pay attention to. When they do, they talk about the contents, not the media itself. And also in English, there is really nothing in English. So, for example, in his seminal work in the television, the effect, social effect, the media scholar Joshua Merovitz briefly mentions television listings and their readers as a foil that underscores the importance of studying televisions and other electric mediums' overall effects without being bogged down by the specific information they convey. So his argument is basically television is an important medium that changes social behavior expectations. And he has good argument examples. But when it comes to this, he basically treats this as something different. So this is the quote from his book. Like the person perusing the television listings in the newspaper. Those who focus only on media content are more concerned with what media brings into the home than with the possibility that new media transform the home and other social spheres into new social environments with new patterns of social action, feeling, and belief. So he acknowledges the power of television. But here, this part is different, right? He is basically exceptionalizing, sort of almost like a dumbing down the people who are looking at, obsessed about the television sections. But so what I would try to do is basically return this quote back to him and say, hey, television listing in newspaper is just as important medium, and you need to think about the effect of it. You cannot just use this as a foil, exceptionalizes, and see what happens here. So uses, the Merovitz refers to the McLuhan's famous dictum, the medium is a message, and that's basically the dictum I go by here and see, dig deep into the history of this. What seems to be frivolous to many people in Japan, this is just totally frivolous thing. But that's what I do. I'm a historian, but I don't go to archives looking for smoking guns. I of course use the archives, but also look for materials in everyday life. Things that seems to be so obvious, also frivolous. But just go back and flip to the other side, see what it looks like, and keep doing it. And start basically try to look familiar things in different light. See what they look like when you start thinking, putting them together in different ways. So here's the example. So let us return to the moment when the last of the major Japanese dailies decided to move its radio and television section to the last page. So on August 1st, 1972, the front page of the morning editions issued by Asahi Shimbun's Tokyo and Osaka head offices announced their paper's new page arrangement. So this is the announcement. And this is the part announcing, there are many changes they made in the pagination or the arrangement. But this is the page part announcing that they are moving the TV radio section to the last page. And this is where things get personal. I remember this. I was reading this. I was age 12. And August 1st, I picked up the newspaper and realized, wait, what's happening here? And I realized something maybe radical or something radically changing. But of course, age 12, I didn't have language framework to understand, articulate what's happening. So that was that. And it took me a while to come back to actually 50 years. So I was at Nishibunken 2022 and finally picking up stuff and start looking at it. So this is a 50-year project, if you can believe me. But anyways, it's honest reaction that we had, and I was not quite sure what to make of this. So as a part of changes, the television and radio program section, formerly buried inside each issue, was now permanently printed on the back page for readers' access. The Asahi was the last major Japanese daily to make this change for its morning editions. These changes signaled the Asahi's editorial leadership finally acquiescing to the fact that their readers spent far more time watching television than reading their publication. Competing to expand their circulation figures in highly saturated market. This is the dates when they one by one. These are the 4-5 major papers in Japan. One by one, they moved the section back page. When you see the pattern numbers, scientists here, you see something going on here, right? So yeah, this is the pattern here. And the Nikkei Keizai is the business paper, like a Wall Street Journal, and so they opted not to. And it's an interesting figure as well, how saturated the Japanese market was and still is. So you see 1972, total number of newspapers, daily publication number was 38 million. to the 31 million households. So each household consumed more than one paper. In this market, how do you sell more papers, right? That's a challenge they faced. This is fierce competition. And one answer was, television. Television is getting popular, and they try to hinge their product onto television. The way to do so is making television sections more prominent, usable, and then people start, hopefully switch, or at least keep up with the competition. If you don't do that, people complain, right? Yours don't have it. Others have it. I'm going to switch the papers. And that's a fear that created the national trend. So, an internal poll of the Asahi. Oh, by the way, I should might also look down the list here. Dismal numbers of 2022 and 2025. Numbers are precipitously dropping, and the state of Japanese publication, Japanese media. And I'm not sure how long this can go on. Japan, to make a story short, because Japan sort of created this close connection between TV and television, they were so successful to saturate the market. But because of that success, Japanese market, Japanese business owners were locked in that success. Therefore, it took them a long time to switch to the internet environment. It took for them to embrace the internet. And they're now paying off. All right, so October 1971, they had the internal survey, and adult respondents read the radio and television program sections at rate higher than those for any other sections. Basically, people are reading newspaper or subscribing to newspapers for TV sections. Numbers are staggering. Like adults, 56.5% of people made sure to read the TV sections. 4.3 points higher than any, the second the section, which was the local news. And for the younger readers, the number was more than 78% of people, younger readers, read TV sections, and which was 28% higher than the next section, which was cartoon section. And the more recent numbers are showing the similar pattern. So numbers are going down, but people are still subscribing, reading newspapers for the TV sections. And that's a pattern. So this 1971 Asahi survey confirms that the paper's readers already expressed a preference for moving television and radio sections to the last page. All Japanese television stations, except for the Nihon Hoso Kyokai, which is NHK, Japan's semi-public broadcasting system, except for that, everybody else has had the long financial and managerial backing of the major newspaper company. Since the early days of television broadcasting, Tanaka Kakue, a powerful member of the Liberal Democratic Party, ruling party, helped the Japanese newspaper companies to cross-own television stations. This is a good way of creating sort of a homogeneous market. And American FCC did not allow that for a long time. But in Japan's case, this is part of the political move, power move Tanaka made, so that the TV companies as well as newspaper companies, owe him something. So this is a ploy to create more pro-LDP opinion in the media. And he worked hard and created this. And Tanaka's scheme basically allowed TV Asahi, the Asahi newspaper we're talking about, allowed to create its own. This is the network. And Nikkei newspaper was allowed to own Tokyo Channel 12 as well. So because of that, all 6 major newspapers in Japan owned TV networks, which is an unusual situation. But that unusual situation defined Japan's media space. Newspaper corporations competed to establish larger media presence through establishing their own television networks. The executives also regarded television stations as a desirable investment destination upon which they can land with golden parachute following their retirement. In reporting that the major dailies control personnel matters of the affiliate television stations. A 1985 Shukan Bunshin weekly magazine article opens with one media watcher's word, quote, "It feels like television is being raped by newspaper," end quote. Notwithstanding the hierarchical relationship between parent newspaper companies and television networks, they quickly traded their places in popularity contest. It was obvious that the media dynamics in the living room was fast shifting, and regional papers initiated the new page arrangements to take advantage of the newly found popularity of television long before the 1970s. So this is something I had to find out myself. So these are the regional papers, not everything, but you can see a lot of them started much earlier. So the effort to gain competitive edge over national and other local papers created regional national trend. According to the survey conducted by Nihon Shimbun Kyokai in May 1959, 34 of 74 papers surveyed already carried television and radio sections on the last page. This is 1959. The Akahata national daily issued by Japan Communist Party had no financial ties, of course, with broadcasting network. On March 1st, 1966, it too started carrying television and radio sections on its back page. And it makes sense, I guess. It sort of appealed to the masses. So for a while, till I would say mid-1970s, Akahata had the best TV section of all papers. And it was the talk of the media people. And it is very interesting to see. They had basically no inhibitions as to providing this to the masses, and that's the way to try to expand the readership as well. For these papers, featuring the radio and television sections on the last page distinguished them from the national dailies and allowed them to piggyback on television's ever-growing popularity. The growing size and new location of television sections attested to the shifting balance between newspaper and television. Daily television listings quietly started their parasitic life, as it were, deep inside host newspapers as soon as television broadcasting began in February 1953. So this is the radio listing, and television section is that, only 110 letters, and that's the humble origin of the listing in the newspaper. But soon, less than 2 decades later, television sections outgrew their radio counterparts and burst through pages to the surface of their host medium, symbolically demonstrating the centrality of the medium, the index in Japan's rapidly changing media environment. Radio never achieved this, even at the height of popularity in 1950s. All right, time for television. August 1st, 1972, when the last of Japan's national dailies moved its TV and radio sections to the last page, the first shifting relationship between newspaper and television reached an inflection point. The page dedicated to radio and television programs is exogenous material that belongs to the temporality of the future, while the paper's other pages principally report on past happenings in a newspaper format, future versus past. Also, think about it. How fast they try, the printed version is always late, right? It takes several hours at least to deliver, to hand the paper into somebody's home. And that time lag makes it always what's on the paper, something past. Whereas what's on this is always future. Telling you what's going to happen, right? So temporality, different temporalities. So what papers' other pages principally report on the past happenings in news format. Television and radio sections are linear, sequential displays of programs that provide information about what will be aired on each given day. By rendering the succeeding hours foreseeable, packaged, and consumable, they shift the reader's attention from the recent past or ongoing present of the news world to the near future that can be experienced in the living room. In other words, unlike the rest of the newspaper, television and radio sections transform the unpredictable future into a certainty on the horizon. As sociologist Mita Sosuke argues, the future encroaches on the present through such modern practices as institutions as, quote, preparation for school entrance examinations, effort to obtain credentials, housing loans, installment savings, old age pensions, and life insurance, end quote. The future is thereby domesticated into something familiar and predictable, and television and radio sections in newspapers perform this domestication as a daily process. Mita also notes that the power of television to instill a keener sense of time in its viewers. But I submit this potential will remain largely unrealized without supplementary medium, which is the program sections on the daily's last page, that helps to form viewing habits. Invoking the Foucauldian concept of discipline, Mita underscores television's temporal dimension. During the early phase of industrialization, individuals employed at factories and offices were trained to live highly regimented time. Schools extended this training to future workers. And television eventually brought this temporal discipline to, quote, the remaining family members, housewives, the elderly, the preschoolers, who neither work nor attend school, end quote. Mita further spells out the medium's effects on family life, quote, television injects an objectified, quantified, and managed temporal order into the private space of family life, which has hitherto existed as a black box and sanctuary within traditional civil society, end quote. Before television, the clock and calendar served as essential tools for instilling sense of time in the individuals, but their function was limited to passively indexing time, whereas television actively reorganized the time family members shared at home. Mita contrasts the solicitous nature of television time to the coercive nature of clock time, insisting that the former's effects are more insidious and far-reaching because it presents itself to each viewer as something desirable. By calling attention to television's invisible work in articulating everyday life, Mita underscores the disciplinary power of this medium. Yet, television needs assistance in converting its viewers into active agents of self-discipline. Television program listings split future into hourly segments and often offer them up for selection. Using them to play a day's schedule, using them to plan a day's schedule is just as pleasurable as, if not more than, the actual consumption of television programs. Writer Uno Chio attested to this pleasure in 1992 essay describing her morning routine, which began with marking the television sections in her daily paper with a red pencil. She found this ritual thoroughly exciting. Quote, today I opened the television sections again, filled with high expectation, end quote. While Uno may have been especially candid about her love of television, millions of her compatriots shared her pleasure in organizing their day around their favorite shows. And I'm going to talk about the singer-songwriter. The song I talked about, I should have mentioned it, was done by the singer-songwriter Inoue Yoshi, probably the best-known Japanese singer-songwriter. And again, he is quoted here. So singer-songwriter Inoue Yoshi, he was born in 1948, confided in the mid-1970s his fans of his issues with newspapers' television information page. And this is what he has to say, quote, I don't subscribe to a newspaper because they carry television sections. If I see them in the morning, I would seriously watch television all day long. It is wonderful that must-be programs are lining up. I would like to make a request to the television people. Please bring down the quality of television programs. Even in the middle of making songs, I get antsy thinking there might be some interesting programs on television. This is before recording, right? You had to watch it on the spot. Clearly, television sections were a powerful trigger for Inoue's TV addiction. And I would say some of his songs show that, I don't know, the affinity to TV imaginations. But anyway, that's what Inoue says. Episodes from the social experiment conducted in 1978 further confirmed awareness of perusing newspaper television sections as an integral part of the television viewing experience in Japan. In that year, the juvenile section of Kobe City's government announced the municipal challenge of not watching television for the entire month of October, which 42 families accepted. One family approached their task with determination by not only taping over their television set's electrical plug, but also discarding the last page of the newspaper as soon as it was delivered in the morning. They knew turning off the television alone would fail to counter its powerful allure. In another family, my mother felt sorry for her son, a junior high schooler. On learning he had been marking the television page for about a week, the teenager was addicted to reading television sections and mapping the immediate future for consumption as he was to watching television programs. This 1978 social experiment and some of its participants' behavior in the temporary absence of television demonstrated that printed listings and guides were no mere extension of television, but a participatory medium with a life of its own. All right, battles over the last page. When the dailies first moved their television sections to the last page, their own staff initially gathered program information and worked on layout. However, to reduce the associated cost, they soon began outsourcing the work of collecting and formatting data about daily programs to an outside agent who took over their valuable back page. Though each paper maintained a small staff to make final editorial layout decisions. So in 1972, 6 major papers got together and sought help from the Tokyo News Tsushinsha, which is Tokyo News Service, which had been publishing Shukan TV Guide, a weekly television information magazine since 1962. In November 1973, the company began serving these 6 papers, covering almost 90% of television section's content, while nominally part of the dailies. The last page thus became an extension, a colonial outpost of sorts, of the television networks, a newly rising information business. Newspapers, hitherto the most ubiquitous and powerful medium in Japan, with over a century of history, have given up containing television and radio sections inside their products, and instead decided to embrace the popularity of rival media, which journalists continued to deem frivolous, with no monetary compensation. Indeed, they paid the Tokyo News Service for its services. So not only they gave up the space, but also they lost all control over that page. Really, they have no control as to how it is organized, displayed. The changes made by the major Japanese dailies in the early 1970s surely irked many proud newspaper editors and reporters. And that was my guess. If you're working for a newspaper and you had pride in your product, you wouldn't be happy seeing what's happening right on the back page. So I tried to find people who can talk to me. And I found one person through different contacts, but the person was just too old to talk to me. So I missed the opportunity. So there's no contemporary, also there's no contemporary records showing the kind of conversation that took place within the business, within the editorial offices. But there are some other circumstantial evidence that show the tensions that existed in the process. For example, journalist Dazai Shin reveals that the negative sentiment persisted among some newspaper reporters some 20 years later. As the dailies competed to augment their television sections in the early 1990s, according to Dazai, some retired newspaper journalists complained that dailies should not be using so much of their precious space for the, quote, likes of competitors' television programs, end quote. And others even demanded that television stations should pay to advertise their programs in newspapers. The retirees were likely rehashing all jealousy and resentment toward television's rapid ascendance in Japan's media environment and newspapers' relative decline during their careers. Available commentary accounts revealed the lack of respect within newspaper organizations toward staff working in the television and radio sections. For example, Iwakiri Yasuto detected condescension when his senior colleague introduced him as the radio TV reporter. Shortly after he became one at the Sankei in 1960, it was in fact impossible to build expertise on television, Iwakiri maintained, as it covered multiple genres of entertainment and the lack of genre-specific knowledge could hurt a reporter's reputation. In Yasui Setsuko's case, she was assigned to the radio and television division 2.5 years after she joined Ehime Shimbun in 1972. The more unproductive work she busied herself with, this is her own word, unproductive work, the stronger her desire to write as a reporter grew. She was finally liberated from working in the division after 8.5 years. To her, this stint was merely a detour to the real work of a reporter. Iwakiri Yasui and probably many of their colleagues who work in radio television sections found it impossible to grow as newspaper journalists because their primary task was to faithfully transmit information about television programs, which limited their labor to page layout and short review articles. Saito Osamu, who joined the Kyoto Shimbun in 1971, recalls that there was a clear yet unspoken hierarchy among the company's various divisions. Proofreading sat at the very bottom, with radio television just above, while politics, economy stood on top. While the personnel in the television and radio division were employed by a daily, they passively served the electric mediums and were thus unable to exercise their journalistic agency. The prominent display of television sections thus belied prideful newspaper journalists' belief in their own news outlets' uncompromising independence. During Japan's high-growth era from the mid-1950s to the early 1970s, newspapers and television quietly fought a fierce battle for dominance in the living room. One by one, dailies kowtowed to the electric medium's popularity, yielding their valuable last pages to the latter's benefit. The contest outcome has gone largely unnoticed in contemporary media or academic circles, despite its deeply cultural, social implications. Of the 3 national dailies that have issued company history books, the Yomiuri, Asahi, and Mainichi, for example, only Mainichi briefly touches on its relocation of the television and radio sections to the last page. Much like television's arrival in the household, television sections migrated to the back page of the newspapers unobtrusively. The little journalistic or scholarly scrutiny they have attracted has focused on the ways in which they were produced and how they represented television programs. A more recent trend treats television grids as a historical archive in which to mine information about past television programs. It appears that the television section's presence on the back page has been so naturalized that readers notice its existence only by its absence. On October 1st, 1978, the Asahi made one final attempt to reclaim its last page by shifting the television section to an inside page. So what they did was they expanded the television page and stuffed it into the middle page. So page 12 and 13, television section, ad, and the radio section. The idea is that, of the 24 pages, the idea is that you can put that out and set aside for easy reference. And people hated it. And so they are bombarded with the complaints. Some days they got 1,000 postcards just complaining. And then sometimes they have to assign the full-time staff to receive the telephone call complaining. People are just attached to the idea that television section on the back page, and they won't take it otherwise. So Asahi capitulated. 8 months later, they put it back, quietly put it back. And 3 weeks later, they explained what they did. They tried, they failed. And that's the state of 1978. So briefly about 1990s, and I'll just try to bring conversation to finish. So the symbiotic yet uneasy relationship that arose between newspapers and television seems to have reached cul-de-sac of media development. As papers began to publish web versions, they dropped television and radio grids from these digital editions, though they continue to carry articles about specific programs. Other web content providers now offer free, speedy access to daily television programs. The television sections nonetheless remain on the back page of most papers, both in printed version and full page view on their internet sites, lest a new pagination further damage their precipitous decline circulation figures. Japanese dailies inertia makes strong contrast with the New York Times excision of daily television listings from its print editions in August 2020, citing ever-expanding digital and streaming options as the main reason. Television sections' continued presence on the back page of Japanese national and local dailies attest to the complementary relationship that television and newspapers have developed and still embrace. Before closing this social history of newspaper television listings in Japan, it is imperative to revisit the moment when television listings on news dailies back page caught readers' attention through failings to fill their allotted spaces. That is when unprecedented disasters struck the nation. When the television grid went blank. The day after Japan was hit by the triple disasters of March 11, 2011, a magnitude 9.1 earthquake, a large-scale tsunami, and nuclear meltdowns, the television grids of the major newspapers' evening editions, with few exceptions, went almost blank. Well, TV Tokyo here on the TV Tokyo 12 listed the program slated for broadcast that evening. It attached a note that the schedule was subject to change, suggesting news coverage would take precedence. NHK Satellite Broadcast 1, which is the second column on the right, station carried a similar program schedule for the evening. In either case, the regular broadcast schedule was abandoned almost immediately to allow coverage of the ongoing national crisis. Viewers right then were desperately seeking disaster-related news and information, not scheduled entertainment programs. For many readers who had accepted the television sections as a natural extension of newspaper pages and of their everyday lives, the blank grids were a shocking sight. Like dark abyss hidden underneath the smooth surface of modern living, gone was the sense of predictability, or their ability to segment and organize their quotidian existence, at least in the living room, according to television listings. This was also a rare moment in post-1972 Japan, where newspapers relegated their television sections to a secondary location, inside pages, for extended periods. When images of devastating damages and loss filled television screens as well as newspaper pages, there was no point in highlighting what else television had to offer. As television was forced to emulate newspapers' primary role as a news medium, the national dailies seems to regain confidence, so to speak, temporarily reestablishing their hegemony as news outlets. Similar dynamics was observable in one Tohoku-based local newspaper, the Kahoku Shinpo. Following the disasters, the daily published a book documenting its staff and affiliates' determination and Herculean effort to issue the paper without a single day's break in dire strait. 7 hours after the catastrophic earthquake, the 2-page extra edition that the company printed arrived at the emergency shelter in Sendai. With a widespread blackout and internet connections severed, this became the only reliable source of information about the disaster. And the evacuees poured over the 2-page issue, some using the glow of their cell phone screens to read. Their pride in undertaking this endeavor is palpable in each chapter of overcoming insurmountable challenges. To the volume's editors, the return of the TV sections to the last page of the morning edition on May 13, 2011, signaled that life in Sendai areas had regained a semblance of normalcy. While the blank television grids garnered some attention in the internet blogosphere, their temporary relocations inside pages, which dramatically reversed the power dynamics between newspapers and television, passed largely unnoticed by readers cum viewers. As Japan began recovering its daily routines, television sections quietly returned to their usual space in newspapers, and the irregular page arrangements appeared forgotten. All right, next example. On March 11th, 2022, 11 years after the Great East Asia earthquake, that's the official name given to the earthquake, the Iwate Nippo, this is another local paper, carried a full-page advertisement featuring the television program section of the March 11th, 2011 issue. On the page is drawn a blue horizontal line, this is blue on the original, across the columns to mark 2:46 p.m., the moment the earthquake jolted eastern Japan. Below the column is message from the newspaper. This is the Iwate Nippo's television columns on March 11, 2011. Until 2:46 p.m., it was just a normal day as usual. On that day, 11 years ago, what we learned was that humans could not know what would happen today. So today, on March 11, 2022, please talk to people you love, end quote. The advertisement portrayed the moment of radical rapture in everyday life against the television sections reminding the precarious and contingent nature of that normalcy that their presence on their back page had come to symbolize. The television information sections permanently displayed on most Japanese news dailies are a symbol of the close ties that newspaper and television forged in Japan's media space with the backing of the LDP. The parent newspaper companies have protected their vested interest in their television networks by stifling the competition. For example, they successfully pressured their LDP backers to thwart the expansion of cable television networks in 1980s and 1990s. That's why cable television never took off in Japan. So television seems to be a safe bet, although the total circulation of Japanese newspaper began to decline slowly in 1999. According to the former television executive and media analyst Kawachi Takashi, president of some major Japanese news dailies may have lost confidence about the future of their product, but confidently stated, quote, newspapers may decline, but we can get by on the profits from television, end quote. They believed they hedged the risk well by hinging the well-being of their business entity onto the television network. The newspaper television syndicates grew so dominant in post-war Japan's media space that they had forcibly suppressed domestic competition. Many assumed that they would remain in the top position for foreseeable future. Their business strategies, boosting each other's readership and viewership, worked well in the self-enclosed domestic media space. However, as internet outlets have become the dominant source of information in Japan, both circulation figures of news dailies and television viewership ratings have steadily declined, with the former shrinking more precipitously. With the transition to digital broadcasting in 2011, most viewers can now consult electric guides displayed on their television screens for program information, while streaming services instantaneously provide program content on demand. I don't have to get into detail of that. Today, people are not watching television and not reading newspaper. So this is from the 2024 survey done by a government office. So for teenagers in Japan, they spend less than 40 minutes watching TV and 30 seconds reading newspaper weekdays. For people in their 20s, they spend 52.6 minutes watching television and whopping 18 seconds reading newspapers. Most national and regional dailies continue to print their television sections on their last page for older readers, and it seems unlikely that the bond between television and newspapers will be severed anytime soon. Television sections moved to the back page of Japan's national dailies in the early 1970s occurred by and large as a known event. The permanent display of television sections on the last page of Japanese newspapers has perhaps been so naturalized that few alternatives are imaginable. The dearth of critical discussion thus far about television sections evidences their ability to hide in plain sight. It remains imperative, however, to recognize the unique arrangement to understand the ways in which television, aided by dailies, television sections, profoundly redefined everyday life in Japan until the advent of wide internet use. The sequential listings of television programs printed on newspapers' back page currently appear seriously disadvantaged against the instantaneous data accessible in cyberspace. Nonetheless, they continue a precarious existence in this disorienting world of the attention economy, perhaps as a source of comfort that allows their long-time habitual users to forge a sense of direction, at least for several hours each day. And I have a bonus image. My talk is done, but I have just one bonus image. So this is the page from, you see, the 2017, March 11th, right, 6 years later. So this is the part I want you to pay attention. But anyway, so they had this special program commemorating the disaster, and this is like a 3-4 hours long, and they had all the information about the program. So what they did was this. They hid the message. So when you read, so normally this section is supposed to be read horizontally. So they hid the message, so when you read it vertically, the message appears. It shows the sort of the degree which the newspaper companies do not have the control over this page. Basically, this becomes almost like a playground for television people, right? So the message is basically created and put in there by the TV producers. And the newspaper people have nothing to do with it. They have to watch this. So that's the sort of a degree, once again, that they lost control over this page. So it really shows there how independent this page is in relation to the body of the paper. All right, that's it. And thank you.